Good morning to all. It's a pleasure for me to give you a brief introduction of the current status of the situation in UPOV in relation to essentially derived varieties. In that regard, just to recall, this concept was introduced in the 1991 Act of the UPOV Convention. And after that, further discussions have taken place in UPOV in order to develop guidance, in order to give greater understanding of this topic. This is an ongoing process, and I would like just to highlight that the last version of the guidance was adopted in 2017 by the UPOV Council. And this is really a crucial moment of a process of reflection on this topic, because this seminar actually is expected to assist the administrative and legal committee of UPOV that is meeting this afternoon and will review whether they need or not to open up discussions on this subject. So this seminar really plays a key role in this reflection within UPOV. Just to recall, what was the purpose of this very important matter? On one side, to ensure sustainable plant breeding development by providing effective protection for the breeder and the benefits for society, and encouraging cooperation between breeders and developers of new technologies. And here there is a very key point, because we have seen how important it is to have a useful guidance that will provide certainty and clarity to enable the cooperation and the agreements between breeders, and to take those decisions that will enable that the system will have the effects that was designed for. Just to simplify in one slide, in one image, and I smile because the person who actually developed that slide is here in the room. So it's just to say that we are in this scenario where there is a breeder one that has developed an initial variety with many other varieties and a lengthy process in the breeding, many years. And then here we have the situation where from that initial variety, another variety is developed. And this development, breeder 2, has come up with something that is of importance and useful, and develops a new variety, variety B. In that regard, for the concept of EDV to take place, there are 3 important elements: that is predominantly derived, that retains expression of essential characteristics, that is clearly distinguishable and conforms with the initial variety in the essential characteristics, except for the difference of derivation. In this case, we are into the scenario whereby there will be, for the commercialization of the second variety, the need to have the authorization of the breeder of the initial variety. But that dependency would only take place if the initial variety is protected. So very important just to put the context of this topic. Already Sven mentioned some of the key elements of the definition in the convention, and the key elements that require further clarity and guidance on how to implement in a way that will be at least providing certain legal certainty. So the 3 elements: predominantly derived, clearly distinguishable, and conformity on the expression of the essential characteristics. If we look into whether an essentially derived variety can be protected, the reason is yes. What are the conditions to grant protection for the essentially derived variety? Actually, they are actually the same as any other candidate variety that will be presented to any national or regional office on plant breeders' rights. The criteria of novelty, distinctness, uniformity, stability, where UPOV has developed a lot of guidance in this topic. The second question: can the essentially derived variety be commercialized? For that question, we know that convention provides, the treaty provides this dependency, so it requires the authorization of the holder of the initial variety. So here, we are into the context of what is the current situation in the guidance that has been adopted in 2017. I would like just to highlight with this image, we have two varieties, one that is essentially derived from the other variety. We see some, I would say, some elements that could be considered essential characteristics. We see other elements that may be less essential. So what is the guidance? Gives us some particular tips on how the way forward. The current guidance provides that there are two possible starting points. So predominant derivation, so whether there is evidence that there is genetic conformity with the initial variety, and we know that there are practice between breeders where molecular markers have been used to come into that initial evidence of genetic conformity. Another possible starting point is conformity on essential characteristics. And then again, the parties also come together to find possible agreements when there is evidence that there is conformity on this expression of essential characteristics. In this regard, questions could be asked. Oh, your variety looks really very having these essential characteristics. Can you prove with the breeding history how you come up with that derived variety if you have not used my initial variety? So these are two starting points that are already reflected in the current guidance. What is the current guidance telling us about the notion of predominantly derived? It provides two key messages: that the intention is that a variety should only be essentially derived from another variety when it retains virtually the whole genotype of the other variety. The other key element is that the derived variety is almost entirely derived from that initial variety. Then another part of the guidance deals with the notion of essential characteristics. And it says, might be considered. Sven already mentioned them, but just to highlight some of the key features of what appears in the current guidance on that particular concept. Essential characteristic means that there are traits that can contribute to the principal features, performance, or value of the variety. Also characteristics that are important from the perspective of the producer, the seller, supplier, buyer, recipient, or users. Seedless grapes, for example. Characteristics that are essential for the variety taken as a whole. Some examples also are given. Characteristics that may or may not be phenotypic characteristics used for the examination of distinctness, uniformity, and stability. In the test guideline for apple, we have as a DUS characteristic the color of the fruit. That could be quite important for the market. And in the case also of these MEM test guidelines, we have the color of the flower of the apple tree. That might be not relevant for that particular concept. So you see, may or may not be a DUS characteristic. They are not restricted to those characteristics that relate only to high performance and value, whether a particular variety, for example, has disease resistance or not to the particular disease. And very important, may be different in different crops and species. So one of the particular elements that had also been identified as a result of the agreement that was at the time in 2017 was that the judgment of essential characteristics is the difference might not be such that the variety fails to retain the expression of the essential characteristics that result from the genotype or combination of genotypes of the initial variety. The guidance also provides that the difference will result from the act of derivation should be one or very few. The derived variety must retain almost the totality of the genotype, a different only for very limited of number of characteristics. So here, I would like to end this just introduction of the context, of this progress of developing guidance by the UPOV bodies concerned by just showing you an image that actually was presented into a seminar on this topic in this room in 2013. It was brought by one of the experts from one of the UPOV members. And I would like to leave you with that question, because I think the importance is to look into what is really happening. What is happening in the real world? What are the situations that the breeders are facing? What is the practice? What is the understanding? So just the question. Here we have an example that was brought of a mutation, a spontaneous mutations of the anthus. The question, it is an essentially derived variety, yes or no? So let's have a meaningful discussion on this topic. Thank you very much for your attention.